Hello, welcome back. That was a very brief pause after a very moving panel with um, organizing toward abolition. I think a point that was made very early on about dismantling, changing, and building, and how those three things have to coexist. And that was just very beautifully said. So thank you for everything there. So many resources, and we harvested all of them. So I would like to welcome a dear friend of mine who I met when we first began organizing this. So I'm really excited to have them here. I'd like to bring forward Kira for our next panel.
Thanks so much, Brian. It's good to see you again. And thanks to everybody for putting this on. I remember when this was just in the idea phase and it took some turns, but I think really just came out in such an amazing way. Yeah, and I am really honored to follow up on that amazing panel that we just had, and really just like grateful for all of that framing and insight, because that's just like, it's so important. Abolition, just like to be holding that in and bringing that into everything that we're doing. So I'm gonna try to figure out how to share my screen, but hey everyone, Kira, I use they, them, and she, her pronouns, and I'm zooming in from Western Abenaki unceded territory, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Can I screen share? Yep, I can. Okay. Can everybody see this? Yeah, so I'm just gonna get right into it. And I guess the first thing to preface all of this with is a content warning. Legal self-defense, like a lot of this is just talking about police and ICE, immigration authorities, and the violence that they enact on people, specifically Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer and trans folks, poor folks. And I'm going to have some slides that have pictures of law enforcement and immigration authorities, but I'm not showing slides that have pictures of cops or immigration authorities like directly in that moment enacting violence on people. So there's images of cops, but they're not like touching anybody or doing anything in that moment that's violence. The conversation, it might bring stuff up for folks, in particular if you are somebody who has had particularly violent experiences with state agents, and this is a hard conversation for you, like definitely for anybody, but especially those folks, please like push pause on this, like shut the computer, take space, whatever you need to do. And if that is you and you want to like engage with this content, but maybe in a different setting, like please reach out to me one-on-one. I'm happy to chat through things and try to like make sure you have access to this content, even if the delivery of this like big Zoom room is not the way that is feeling good for you in this moment to like absorb this. And yeah, other than that, if I'm not making sense or if I can clarify something, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat if you have questions. But the thing I probably won't have time to do is to answer hypothetical questions about different fact patterns. That's something that people really like to ask when we do legal self-defense trainings. And I don't have the time in this training to talk about like, well, what about this situation? But clarifying questions are amazing. I get a little bit incoherent when I'm nervous. So also if you're like, need to tell me to slow down or re-explain, just like gesticulate wildly with your camera on or pop a question in the chat, whatever will work is good with me. And just some like quick intro kind of intentions I want to try to bring into this training is trying to like reject white supremacy culture, which is hard because it's everywhere, right? Being the white supremacy culture is like not specifically in race-based terms, but it is like kind of invisible social and cultural norms that cement racism and anti-Blackness, and really are a detriment to our movements and our projects, even for those of us who are white, while that is also privileging us. So trying to like attack the way that white supremacy culture shows up in training spaces, specifically today, thinking about things like perfectionism. It's more important to be accountable when we do make mistakes rather than to never make them. So I'll probably make a ton of mistakes in this training. It'll be like bumbly and we'll get through it together. And, going into that with the, like not being defensive if If we're hearing things that are maybe other people making mistakes, or maybe other people saying or doing things that we wouldn't say or do, and thinking about feedback as like a gift, as a labor that is meant to deepen a relationship rather than to undermine it. So feel free to drop some feedback in the chat, or kind of say whatever you want, add your own perspectives and experiences to this, right? Because there's not one right way to do this. There's not one right way to do legal self-defense. There's not like, it's not one thing or this thing. There's like a lot of both ands in this. And if your direct personal experience doesn't match what I'm saying, I'm probably missing something. So trust your gut, but also with that, and especially for those of us whose intersections of privileged identities maybe have like corrupted our gut with things like anti-Blackness and ableism and racism and classism and the cis heteropatriarchy, it's like, trust your gut and also be critical of the ways that your gut might have been corrupted by systemic oppression. So I'm gonna try to get through all of this content today, but recognizing that there's way too much to fit in an hour and there's way too much to learn and to do in the world. So we're not gonna be able to get through everything that I would hope that we could tonight, and that's okay. And we're in this for like the long haul, and these problems have existed and will continue to exist, and we're just like doing what we can while we can in the as much of an integrity way as possible. And that maybe means like not covering all of the topics that a full legal self-defense training might otherwise entail. The last tenet of white supremacy that shows up in particular in a training setting is like power hoarding, and this, you know, power dynamic right now, especially for me as an attorney, as somebody who has been through law school, it programs me to present my opinion as objective truth. That's like a toxic trait of lawyers, is we're really opinionated. I'm also a Virgo, makes it worse, I would say. Like, just this is our truth, and it's actually just an opinion. So be critical and curious and skeptical of things that I'm sharing, and you know, don't listen to me too much. Like, you're right, your perspectives and differences from me are valid, and we're all kind of learning this together, even though it is, unfortunately, due to the settings of this training, like a lot of it is just a one-way information dump. And if you are curious about white supremacy culture, Tema Okun has a really great zine. I put a link to it at the end of this presentation. So speaking of things that are like I'm really opinionated about and present them as truth, I just want to talk really quickly about abolition, because that is for sure a truth for me. I think that abolition is like, it's both a goal and a theory of change. It's like both utopia and it's how we get there. So it's really important for me to be framing everything that I'm doing from a perspective of abolition. It's like a crime right now to just exist, and it is a crime to resist, and it's illegal for us to just like be alive and take care of each other and our ecosystems. So we think about laws and cops and courts, and they exist to target people, whether that's because they're poor or Black or Indigenous or undocumented or disabled or queer or trans, or they want autonomy over their own body. And then we have all these laws and cops and courts that go after anybody that challenges the structures that cement these oppressions. So we have both of these things. Legal self-defense as a practice can be helpful, whether you're trying to just survive in the world or whether you're trying to organize a revolution, or both. And the last thing too is just the more that you put that wall up between yourself and law enforcement, the more that you make that wall a cultural norm, make that resistance part of the kind of everyday practice of your community. You normalize it, and that keeps everybody safer. So that's just the baseline assumption for this training. If you're not an abolitionist, oops, too far. Yeah, I'm really glad you're here. Welcome. Thanks for putting up with me. And that's totally fine to not be an abolitionist to be on this panel. I don't want to go back and forth about it right now, but if you do have questions or want to talk about it, that's my email on the slide, and I would love to chat later. But the thing that I do ask of everybody is that this is not information that we share with law enforcement. So not to talk about this training with members of law enforcement, recognizing that like they could totally be on this panel, and there's really nothing we could do about that. They could be in this Zoom room. But it's important to just minimize the amount of information that we share with law enforcement, including the content of this presentation. Because what we know is that what you tell one cop, you're functionally telling every single cop and every single agency, state, federal. Think about like data fusion centers where the Homeland Security creates this hub, and information is shared fluidly between state and local police and state troopers and border patrol and private corporations and these nasty privatized police forces like Securitas. They all share and exchange information, and what you tell even just like your friend's cousin who's a cop, you're giving information to this huger system. So even if you don't believe that, every cop is part of this system and like is dangerous and a threat to like our all continued existence and survival, what you tell one cop, you tell the worst cop. So that's where I'm coming from with this. And just to dive right into it, what is legal self-defense? It's sometimes called know your rights. I learned from this guy, Carlton Williams, who's an amazing, brilliant Black attorney in the National Lawyers Guild, that it's a little bit more accurate to call it legal self-defense because it's not magic, and the Constitution like wasn't written for most or any of us on this call anyway. So it applies to, it's basically like how to stay safe as possible when you're interacting with law enforcement officers. And law enforcement officers is really anybody that the US or a state government pays or arms or trains, encourages, and immunizes from legal consequences to detain you, to arrest you, to forcibly relocate you, to imprison you, to do any number of things. And the key is that they're like paid and trained by the state or the state or federal government. So this is cops, sheriffs, prosecutors, judges, prison guards, anybody and everybody. And when we practice legal self-defense, there's really two considerations that should probably be informing how we apply these skills. So the two kind of major determinants of how an interaction goes and how you might want to be thinking about your own legal self-defense practices is who are you and who are you dealing with? I'm going to start with the second question of that. Who are you dealing with? And there are kind of two main categories of people you might be dealing with in terms of agents of the state. And there are immigration authorities. So Department of Homeland Security was formed in, I think, 2001 after 9/11. And that is ICE, Border Patrol, and USCIS. USCIS are like the desk people that you don't really interact with that much unless you are like filing paperwork or trying to, proceed on the path to citizenship or get a visa or whatnot, but they don't come out into communities. ICE and CBP are coming out into communities. ICE internally and CBP along the border within 100 miles of Canada, Mexico, or the oceans. And when you're dealing with immigration authorities, really the key difference is that prevention is of the utmost importance. So you want to prevent people from getting caught up in that system. You want to prevent people's constitutional rights from being violated. You want to just like stop the bad things before they even happen. And I see the comment in the chat. I think it's okay that the recording is on, although we can check in about how it's shared after. So the goal is prevention, because immigration courts are just like courts in general are horrific and racist and arbitrary and violent, but immigration court in particular, there's basically no rules. Like people do whatever they want. The government has like rampant freedom to just invent whatever they want to do and do it as they go along. A friend of mine is an immigration attorney, and she describes it like in all seriousness as like traffic court with the death penalty. It's horrible. So keeping people out of that system as much as possible by preventing. State law enforcement, that's a different story. That's like sheriffs, constables, municipal police, state troopers. Prevention is still really important and should be the goal, but documentation is somewhat more of a viable option. Like you're slightly more likely to be able to claw your rights back after they've been violated in a courtroom, because the court has a little bit more adherence to the rules, but again, it's all a rigged, biased system. And like all that being said, these strategies like don't always work. Anybody can get arrested for anything. Anybody can get shot for anything. Anybody can really like experience all kinds of harm just for existing. And that is mostly a function of like who you are and not how well you've memorized legal self-defense strategies and whatnot. So, legal self-defense is not a magic shield. Like we're just trying to get in the habits of doing the best we can. And who are you? That's the biggest determinant really of how law enforcement interactions will go. The US Constitution like purportedly applies to everybody, even undocumented folks, but in reality, you know, we all see like the ways that different people have their rights respected or not, have their autonomy respected or not, based on just like how that cop feels that day and their interactions with you based on your projected identity. So the question is, who does a cop see when they look at you? And this is where like a huge limitation for these kinds of trainings, especially with a trainer, like a white trainer comes in. My personal strategies are gonna be totally limited because I've developed them based on how cops treat me. And so you're gonna definitely want to trust your experiences with cops and trust your identities, and you know how a cop is more likely to treat you. So if the way that I phrase something, when I'm like, oh, I would say this to a cop, and you're like, wow, that would be a horrible idea for me. Like, you are 100% right. Don't listen to how I would phrase it. Trust yourself on that, because right, kindness and brutality are both tactics that police are trained to use to achieve their ultimate institutional goal, and which one we might receive in any given moment says way more about like our projected identities than it does about what we're doing, how well we know the law, or like the personality of that cop. So this is like important for me to be upfront about the identities and projected identities that I have, so that you can decide what's going to work for you or not. If we do have on this call any other white settlers who are gender nonconforming and able-bodied and about 5'4", financially and academically privileged, downwardly class mobile anarchists with facial piercings and law degrees driving their mom's old Subarus, you can apply all of this exactly as I'm doing it, maybe, but everybody else, like, really try to interpret this for yourself. And the other thing about that too is like, it depends on who you're with. So how I interact with a cop when I'm in a multiracial space is going to impact the experience of my friends who are Black or Indigenous or people of color in my vicinity. The last thing that I want to do is be a little punk and like escalate with a cop, because like cops, when they get afraid, that's when they're most dangerous. If I make a cop afraid, they're going to take that out most likely on like my Black friends sitting next to me, not on me. So being really aware of like trying to have the best possible consent culture with how your interactions impact the people around you and what they're comfortable with. And also like things like when you learn self-defense, it can be really feel empowering to be like, oh, I want to help my community. I see a cop talking to somebody on the street, and like, I want to go in and be a part of that conversation to help them out. Like consent is really important there too, because we don't want to take autonomy away from other people, like civilians in that situation. Nothing feels worse than when you're like, I got this, and someone cuts in and like makes you feel like you must need saving because they're trying to save you. So try to get some eye contact, try to like have a quick verbal, hey, are you good? Like, do you want company, or some kind of way to check in with somebody if you're doing any kind of intervention with legal self-defense. Because you never know what somebody is feeling in that moment or whether they want help. And a lot of times it is really helpful to have a buddy there, or to have a buddy who's been trained in legal self-defense, but like consent is really important. And that's really the only thing that we can control, is how we treat each other and not how cops treat us. So I guess like giving an anecdote of that, I was teaching a friend of mine how to drive a couple of years ago. And she is a Jamaican immigrant, and she's Black. We were in rural Vermont. A state trooper pulled us over, and me and my like legal self-defense brain was like, oh, like, do you want me to film? Like, do you have your phone? Like, and she was like, no, I'd rather not film this interaction. Like, and could you do the talking? And it was one of those, like, I don't want to supersede what I think is right with her personal experience. Like, she knows herself best. She knows what makes her feel safe in that interaction. Like, I'm not going to film, even if maybe I think like, oh, that would be smart, because like ultimately what is smart is respecting her position in that moment, and respecting her, like knowing herself best and how that interaction is going to feel. And like, her autonomy is way more important than my like Virgo nerd brain being like, oh, but we should do this. Like, no, just like be open and honest with your kind of people around you, so that like you can make a plan together and try not to like impact other people with how you're handling a cop interaction. So I'm gonna put folks into breakout rooms if you want to, and have a couple of questions. I can like model going through it, and then we can do breakout rooms. There are, let's see, 6 breakout rooms. And what did Alfonso, are they? Alfonso was helping out with tech. So I was thinking that like 1 through 5 could be anybody of any race, and then breakout room number 6 for BIPOC folks. If you want a space that is just for you, like to caucus and not be in breakout rooms with white people, you're welcome to go to breakout room number 6. White people go to breakout rooms 1 through 5, and then kind of go from there. But we're gonna spend 10 minutes talking and kind of keeping in mind the ground rules and assumptions that we've gone over a couple of times in the thing. Let me put those in the chat. The Radical Gathering ground rules and assumptions. Thanks so much to the planning team for putting those together. That's amazing. Just keeping those in mind when we are having these conversations. But if people want to just maybe try like introducing themselves and talking about one of these questions that feels meaningful to you. So I can give an example. We've heard a bit about my identities and privileges and the ways that that influences how cops treat me. When I talk to cops, I get really nervous. I get really like squirrely and freaked out. And that causes me to often go into one of my like fear and trauma responses, which is to turn everything into a joke. And that does not play well. Like it is a thing that I'm really trying to program out of myself, because like I just turn into like a little mouthy punk, and that often escalates in a way that is not good for me or the people around me. It often like, has the ability to put my friends at risk when I'm like, scared. And that's my like default nerve response, is like to be funny in a situation that is fundamentally not funny. So that's a thing that I'm working to change about myself. And that is something that maybe you all want to talk about in breakout rooms. Like, what does it feel in your body? How does your cop demeanor manifest? Are you, do you cry? Are you making jokes? Are you angry? Like any of those things, everything is valid. And I'm going to, see if we want to pause on this and take 10 minutes to hang out in breakout rooms. And I don't know how we make that happen.
Can we just put the questions in the chat first? I'm working on it now, so that way everybody has that accessible to them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, cool. So breakout rooms 1 through 5 for white people or anybody, and 6 if you are BIPOC and want to have a space that is just for BIPOC. Welcome back, everybody. I don't know if this is visible in the chat, but I just made a shareable version of these slides. So if it's easier for you to get out of the like share screen mode, oh, Ryan, you read my mind. Then feel free to like close out of the one that's me doing it and look at it on your own screen, if that's easier. And in terms of like sharing these, I think it's probably fine to just share them around with whoever, but don't tell anyone you got them from me. And yeah, so just kind of diving back into it when people are mostly back in the room. Thanks everybody for connecting with each other. I hope that the conversations went well. And we're gonna just dive right into like kind of thinking about the ways that we wish we maybe had a different response when we're interacting with law enforcement, or the ways that we want to try to have a little bit more autonomy or control as much as we possibly can in these interactions with cops, recognizing that at the end of the day, law enforcement really does just get to do whatever they want. And a lot of our job is just influencing what it is that they want to do. So I have 2 pretty like major, like if you really can only take like 1 or 2 things away from this conversation, taking away the reality that cops lie to you, that they are trained to lie to you to get what they want, that they like basically go to school to like learn how to manipulate you. And that it is everything from them saying that maybe they have evidence against you in order to get you to confess to something, like, oh, your friend already confessed, but if you sign this admission statement, it'll be easier on you. Your friend didn't confess, they don't even know your friend, but then you sign the statement and that becomes like incrimination and that kind of thing. Or everything from like, I don't know, just saying, oh, like if you don't do this, that's going to be a felony, when really maybe the thing that you're doing is a petty misdemeanor, but they just want to scare you into stopping doing it. So thinking about the phrase, I want you to believe that, and imagining that that's how cops start every sentence. So I could think of a time when, and this is all, when I say cops, I mean like also Border Patrol, ICE, prosecutors, like anybody that is, again, like paid by the state and immunized from legal consequences for kidnap and murder. So the last time that I talked to somebody from Border Patrol, I was going through a checkpoint and decided to just not say anything in order to kind of like see if I could draw resources. And so when you go through a Border Patrol checkpoint, within 100 miles of the border, they ask, are you a citizen? And this was in Vermont. And so it's, you know, a different thing when it's on the southern border. Like Border Patrol is different geographically. So definitely, again, like take this with a grain of salt. And for folks who live in the southern part of this region or country, like, you know, apply this differently, because it's not maybe the way that this would go in that area. But in Vermont, you say, if you say nothing, they ask you to pull your car aside and they put spike strips in front of your tires, and then they circle your car, often with sniffer dogs and like a bunch of Border Patrol agents. They like film you, they look up your license plate, they do all these things, and they say, we're gonna keep you here until you talk to us. And what they're really saying is, I want you to believe that we're gonna keep you here until you talk to us. So every time a cop, you know, opens their mouth and says something to you, imagine that that's how they're starting their sentence. I want you to believe that whatever they're saying. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying. It just means that they're telling you exactly what they want you to think, and to be critical of that. The second thing to keep in mind when you're dealing with law enforcement is that really at the end of the day, like memorizing the law is not going to help you that much, because cops don't actually care whether they're following the law. They are right. They are the law. And the best thing that you can do is just like try to control like their emotional state of being, because how they're feeling in that moment is gonna basically dictate what they do, much more than like, did you memorize the right phrase and use it at the right time? So de-escalation could be a whole training in and of itself. Like I'll just really quickly go into a couple things. And again, like this is different based on things like neurodiversity, but about 90% of communication is tone and body language. So I want to have like my hands with open palms and like low down by my sides. If you can like deepen your voice a little bit and speak slowly, not moving quickly, that kind of thing. Personal space is also really important. If you get too close to a cop, that like makes them angsty, try to stand on the side of their body that is not where their gun is, if you're in a position where you're able to maneuver with relation to them. Things like eye contact are really like projected identity specific. So like for me as a white person, like kind of masculine presenting, like I'm going to make a little bit of eye contact, but I might not want to make a ton, and I might not want to make none. But again, that's like, trust your gut, and like you know yourself best with regards to things like how to interact with space and eye contact. The other thing, if you know in advance that you're going into a situation where you're going to be interacting with law enforcement, do your favorite grounding exercise. Like really try to be in your body as much as possible. Try not to be nervous, even though that's totally understandable to be nervous, because that's how cops are trained to make you feel. But like just go into it as much as possible with like attention to your breath, because if you can exude just a little bit of calmness, like your escalation is going to make the cop afraid, and cops are most dangerous when they are afraid. And then like the last thing is just like, you can't really reason. Like it's not like getting into an argument is as much as it might be your instinct, especially if you're someone like me who gets really nervous around cops, like try to memorize and practice the key phrases, so that if you are like a nervous word vomiter, you vomit out something that is helpful to you, that is safer, less incriminating than maybe what you otherwise would say. So key phrases, and if you want to say them with me, that'd be awesome. You can unmute or you can stay on mute, whatever, but let's just say all these together and then later on, like practice them again, like get your roommate or your housemate or your friend to pretend to be a cop and pretend that you're in situations and really actually try to get these into your muscle memory, because that's really the only way to access them when you're in a really heightened emotional state. So starting with the first one, you can say, am I free to go?
Am I free to go?
Or the same, it's the same, means the same thing, but a different phrasing is, am I being detained? Am I being
detained?
This is a really key one. I have a right to remain silent.
I have a right to remain silent.
You have a right to remain silent just anytime up and until you are in custody with a lawyer next to you. So there is one exception for the 22 states where you have to say your name when you're detained, and we'll get into that. But except for that one exception, you always have a right to remain silent, and it is almost always the best course of action to just not talk. I have a right to remain silent, and just raise that shield. Once you say that, they're supposed to stop talking to you. But then if they say like, oh, how do you, like, that's a nice bird over there, and you say, oh yeah, that is a beautiful bird, you've just waived your right, and they can start talking to you again. But all you have to do is say it again, and that lifts the shield up. So I have a right to remain silent. The other thing you might want to be really explicit about is something like, I do not consent to this search. I do not consent to a search.
I do not consent to this search.
If they're physically interacting with you, like if they are physically like touching you, rifling through your stuff, like going in your pockets, going in, like if they are like have their hands on you, something you might want to add to that is, I'm not resisting, but I do not consent to the search, because it's always bad to really like put any kind of physical force into an interaction with a cop. So being explicit, saying that out loud, saying that with witnesses, have somebody nearby like perceiving you to say that. That's why it's always good to have a buddy with you when you're interacting with cops, so that somebody hears you when you are very explicit and you say, I'm not resisting, but I don't consent to this search. And then the last thing that's good to know is like ask for a warrant. And we'll talk about when you would do that. So there's 3 levels of police or ICE or Border Patrol interaction. I'm gonna just run down the 3 levels really quickly and then apply them to different scenarios, like different specific, like how does this work when you're in a car? How does this work when you're in your house? How does this work when you're out in a park somewhere? So the first level is general questioning. Cops can do this at any time for any reason. They don't need any like proof to get there. They're gonna chit chat. And the best way to handle that interaction is to get out of it as soon as possible, because the more access that you give them to like talk to you, the more that you make yourself vulnerable to being lied to. And cops lie to get what they want. And like the best way to like not even have to decide, am I being lied to, is just don't give them the opportunity to even talk to you in the first place. What they're going to want to do if they have a motive is to escalate these levels of interaction. So to go from general questioning to being detained, which is where they have the ability to make sure that you stay in that place. It's not arrest, but it's like you're stuck there, and they can hold you briefly to try to look for that level of proof that they need to get to arrest or search. So they're just looking for the foothold that they need to get to the next level. And your goal is to get out of the interaction if you can, and if you can't, to just like put that wall up so that they don't get what they need to go to the next level. The standard for detaining, they need reasonable suspicion. We'll talk more about what to do and what to say in different contexts. And then arrest is where they have full control over your body. They can put you in the cop car. They can take you down to the station. They can put you in jail. They can initiate criminal proceedings. And that requires either probable cause, like more than 50% chance that you've done the thing based on facts that they can articulate, or a warrant. And we'll talk more about warrants. The same standard for arrest is for search, because when you get arrested, part of that is that they get to search your whole body, everything that you have on you, and like anything kind of in your wingspan immediate area. So those are the 3 levels. I ran through them really fast, but we're going to slow down and apply them. Also, this is a card that a friend of mine and I use for other trainings. And if you want, I can drop the link in the chat afterwards or send it out to like print out and share around. and don't tell anyone where you got it. The first situation we could talk through is like what happens when you're out and about, like in a public space. So this could be sitting in a park, going down the sidewalk, or just like generally out in the world, not in a car. And assuming that you're starting from general questioning, like that a cop's just going to come up to you and be like, hey, how's it going? Or hey, like I have some questions for you, or any number of things. And your goal again is to just like not give them access to your ears and your like thoughts so as to like lie to you, to get you to give them grounds to escalate that interaction or to like get information that puts someone else in danger. So you want to get out of there, put the wall up, get out of that interaction. The best way to do that is just to say, I don't want to talk to you. And you can literally straight up say, I don't want to talk to you. Or you can say, am I being detained? Am I free to go? So if they say, yes, you're being detained, then you have to stay. But if they say, no, you're not being detained, or yes, you're free to go, you want to just get out of that situation. And you want to, again, be mindful of the de-escalation things. So like whether or not you make eye contact as you're leaving, that is like you know yourself best and your identity and whether that feels safe. Do not like go really close to them. Like you want to give them a wide berth as you're leaving, and you want to wait till they tell you it's okay. Because even if you're legally allowed to leave, they could just make up some reason to like tackle you on your way out, because cops can do that if they feel like it, even if it's technically unconstitutional. So leaving as safely as you can. If you are being detained, you just want to like shut down and hang tight. There are stop and identification laws in these 23 states that are listed there with, I think I got all the state acronyms right. If any of those states are states that you spend a lot of time in, take a look at that, write that down, and like look up the statute, because it is a little different in every state. But generally, if you live in one of those states and you've been detained, you have to tell the cop your name. It doesn't count when you're not being detained. So generally questioning you, like cops you don't have to tell a cop your name if they just like walk up to you on the street, unless you're being detained. But it is a little different in each state. So I would look at that. And when your other things to do is just make sure you're not consenting to a search. Make sure that you are not like engaging in chit chat with them. You have a right to remain silent. You should verbally assert that, be explicit, and just hang tight and don't let them search you. They can like pat down the outside of your body in some states, but you can also say, hey, I'm not resisting, but just so you know, I don't consent to a search. Even if they're patting down your body and you think they might be allowed to do that, a good thing to do just as a precaution is to say, hey, I'm not resisting, but I don't consent to a search. So that if they do go beyond what they're supposed to do, or if they think they can get away with something, it's like in their brain that, oh, this person like is flexing some legal self-defense knowledge and I maybe don't want to be as invasive as I otherwise would have been. And you can ask them why they're detaining you and try to get them to like say facts. That is, basically kind of how you want to just like get out as much as possible, avoid the escalation, and like don't talk to them. Even if you're being arrested, you still have a right to remain silent. So like, not making things worse for yourself is really key. The second situation is if you're in a car and you get pulled over, that's automatically starting from the place of being detained. So when a cop is like, you know why I pulled you over? They're asking you, what reasonable suspicion do I have to detain you? And it's probably actually not the best idea to answer. Like if you get pulled over because your taillight is out and then the cop says, do you know why I pulled you over? And you say, oh, I was speeding, right? Like you just kind of put yourself in worse trouble because now you've given them another crime to put on if they want you. So you want to just like, again, not give them the foothold. You want to hand over your license and registration. In a couple of states, you have like 24 or 48 hours to produce your license and registration. But again, it's sort of like, unless you don't have it, and that's why you can't hand it over, advisable just to hand it over so that you're not like escalating things, just to kind of like keep it to the basics. Here's my license, here's my registration, but you don't have to say where you're going. You don't have to say what you have in the car. You don't have to say like what you've been doing or any of like, you just license and registrations, and then kind of like, hey, I don't want to chit chat or something. I have a right to remain silent, or, with all due respect, sir, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like whatever level of politeness or like aggression feels appropriate for you to stay safe in that moment. When they've detained you, what they're doing is they're looking for something to like get you with, basically. So they could pace around your car and look through your windows. They can't go in your car unless you consent. So if they say, hey, can I take a look in your trunk? You would say, I don't consent to a search, or you would just say, no, you can't do that. But if they see something through a window, it's called the plain view exception, that looks illegal to them. So like, say, you have some like spilled baking soda on your car seat, or you have like, I don't know, you're in a state where there's like different firearm registration laws, and they can see a gun and they think that you maybe have that like without filling out the paperwork or getting the license, then they could go in because they see something that they've decided is illegal in plain view, and they can open your door and actually like search through your whole car. So trying to make sure your car is clean from the like outside looking in perspective, and being aware of things that might be totally legal but look illegal, just because they're going to grasp at any excuse. It's also a good idea when you go to a protest to keep your windows rolled up and your car locked, because cops have been known to plant stuff in plain view in your car when they want an excuse to then pull you over for a traffic pretext and search it later. They say that, what is it? A cop can follow anybody for 5 minutes and find a pretext to pull them over. So it's really just like trying to make sure that you do as much as possible to minimize the footholds that you can give them later. If they arrest you, they can't just like search your whole car. So say you've got a warrant out for your arrest and you get pulled over, and they say, oh, are you this person? Like, here's your arrest warrant, you're under arrest. That doesn't mean that they then get to look through your trunk. Like, they can search your immediate wingspan area, but they can't search the whole car. Unless they, again, have your consent or they can see something in plain view. So it's really important to be verbally explicit. Like, they're going to make you think that your consent is going to help you get out of there faster, but like, you never know what they're going to say that they've found. And it's just always a good idea to refuse to consent to a search and to be like really firm about that. That is, the kind of quick and dirty car legal self-defense. Also noting that if you're a passenger in a car, you never have to say anything. Law enforcement at your house is like actually the easiest one. Like, just don't answer the door. If a cop knocks on your door, like, try to make sure it's locked and just like don't answer the door, and hope that they go away. If they're like really coming back again and again, or if you're worried that they're going to break your door down, or you like accidentally answer the door and then realize it's a cop, don't have the door wide open and just like talk through a wide open door. The best thing to do, if you're comfortable with this, is to step outside and close the door behind you. If you're not comfortable with that, to just like tiny crack, open it a tiny bit. And really what you just want to say is like, I don't want to talk to you. You don't want to be having a chit chat with them. I've like known cops to be like, pretend that they're looking for like a lost kid, and like really they're looking for somebody who they believe to like have crossed the border without paperwork, and that they're just going to call CBP as soon as they find out where this kid is. So even if they're like, this puppy is about to die unless you tell me this fact that I want to know, what they're saying is, I want you to believe that this puppy is going to die unless you like narc. And there is no legal obligation to give information to police when they're just like questioning you, right? So it's always good to be skeptical about like what they're asking you and why, and to just not give them that opportunity to just say, I don't want to talk to you. If they try to come in your house, they need a warrant or probable cause, like something that they can see in plain sight that's illegal. But it has to be probable cause that you've committed a crime for them to arrest you. It has to be probable cause that you have committed a crime for them to search you. It can't be like, I think that you have evidence in your pocket that is about your neighbor's bank robbery. Like, that's not you, that's your neighbor. That doesn't get them to abrogate your Fourth Amendment rights. So, being really clear about like, if you want to come in my house, like, you need a warrant, ask to see it, and it has to be like really specific. It has to have your correct address on it. It has to be a search warrant or like an arrest warrant with that address on it. If it's just like a general arrest warrant for the wrong house, if it's more than 10 days old, and if it's a search warrant, like, what are they searching for? If they are searching for a human being, they can't come in your house and look in your jewelry box. Like it's got to be like the search has to be for what they are looking for, and it has to be to that area. Sometimes there'll be time limits on the warrant, like they have to execute it within this hour to that hour. And if it's outside the time window, like, sorry, they have to go home. So ask to see the warrant and like take your time looking at it. And then I want to flag too, when you're dealing with immigration authorities, be really wary of forms 205 and 200, and that'll say it right on the bottom of the form. Those are not warrants that are valid in any way for abrogating Fourth Amendment rights. So they don't actually have a judge's signature. Like they have like a stack of these forms in the back of their vans, and they fill them out themselves, and the judge doesn't sign it. It doesn't actually mean that they have any right to search your house, to go anywhere, like to have access to you or your car. So if somebody hands you that warrant, like you can just, this isn't valid. This is not signed by a judge. You can't come in my house. And that's what I mean about immigration authorities. Like, don't even let them, because if you say, uh-oh, it's a warrant, and you let them in your house, even if it wasn't a valid warrant in immigration court, it's so much harder to claw that right back. So you have to like really shut the door in their face and not let them get away with something, because the immigration court doesn't care if they didn't have a constitutional right to search your house. They're just going to make up the rules. So really check the warrant. And here's an example of a judicial warrant versus an administrative ICE warrant. The judicial warrant is valid. Let me see if I can zoom in. Oh, nope. I need to not try to be fancy, but the judicial warrant is valid, and the ICE warrant is not. It doesn't get them access to your house. So really being careful of that. Other things specific to Border Patrol and immigration, generally the same rules apply. The Constitution, they need reasonable suspicion to detain you and probable cause to arrest you, with one exception, and that is Border Patrol doesn't need reasonable suspicion to detain you when you're within 100 miles of the border. That's what that map is on the right side of the screen. That's 2/3 of our population. So 2/3 of the population of the so-called United States lives in an area where Border Patrol can just like detain you for literally no reason. And that's, again, just like one of those, really just, they're going to pull you over, and it's blatantly going to be about race or accent or how they perceive you to be. So a good way to handle that, if you are somebody who has white privilege and citizenship privilege, to just like be like, I'm not going to talk to you, and exercise that right so that it becomes less conspicuous when people who are being profiled also exercise that right. ICE and Border Patrol, they don't have any authority to enforce state criminal laws, but they probably are going to lie to you to make you think that they can. So you're not going to like get pulled over for having a taillight out by ICE. They can't enforce those laws. Like, they're only allowed to enforce federal immigration laws. When you go through a Border Patrol checkpoint, that's the only thing that they should be, that they have the authority to be engaging with, and you don't have to talk to them. Nobody else in the car has to talk but the driver. The driver doesn't even have to talk. Like, you can just say, I don't want to talk to you. And they can detain you for any reason because you're within 100 miles of the border. But beyond that, they're not supposed to be able to do anything. The other special privilege is within 25 miles of the border. They can come on your land. They can go into your outbuildings, but not your like homes, your dwellings, for any reason. So if ICE or Border Patrol like gets on a bus, like a public transit bus, and they're, they pull it over and they're like about to go up and down and ask every single person if they're a citizen, a good thing to do if you feel comfortable doing this might be to go to the front and say, hey, and just be super loud so that everybody on the bus can hear you, be like really assertive and just say, nobody on this bus is going to talk to you. All of us are exercising our right to remain silent. So you don't have any business being here, because nobody here is going to talk to you. And that is, if you do it loud enough, everybody else on the bus can kind of hear that they have that right. And then everybody just can kind of fold their arms and not say anything. And that keeps people safer who might otherwise be targeted, as opposed to if like you let them go up and down and like talk to everybody. So, get with a buddy after this training and practice saying that. Pretend that they're ICE, that they've gotten on a bus, and you just say, nobody on this bus wants to talk to you. We're all exercising our right to remain silent. And like put that wall up. I think that, the last, I don't know how I'm doing on time. I'm probably over. Oh, I'm way over. The last thing I wanted to just briefly flag is security culture. So it's not really about like what's legal or illegal or lawful or unlawful. It's this practice that we get in like a bunch of habits. It's kind of like wearing a seatbelt. You don't wear it because you think you're going to get in a car accident. You wear it because it's an easy way to mitigate the risk that you take when you get in a car that you might get in an accident. So a lot of security culture practices is just like thinking about what is the worst possible thing that could happen. What is the most likely bad thing to happen? And how can I take precautions that are reasonable that allow me to feel more comfortable taking these risks? And the risks might be like government surveillance. It might be getting arrested for doing actions or participating in organizing that is threatening to the state. It might be, you want to like, you would use security culture if you're helping a friend get an abortion. You would use security culture if you are doing organizing work and being targeted by fascists and bigots and white supremacists. If you are organizing against the pipeline or like any number of things. And it's important to make sure that we like use it as an excuse for community building and not for like being afraid and closed off, right? Like if you're trying to build a movement, you actually want to be as inviting as possible. Security culture is not about just like never talking to anybody about anything ever. It's about saying like, which information should I be sensitive with and which information can I be free with? So if you're planning a protest and it's public and it's like all out there on the internet, like it's totally fine to talk about that in large groups with people you don't know. If you're planning an underground action where maybe you're gonna like go someplace and like snip a bunch of like power lines and, cause some like good chaos or free a bunch of like animals at a fur farm, like you don't want to talk about that in front of anybody you don't know. You don't want to talk about that over unencrypted tech. You don't want to talk about that in front of cameras, or really just kind of being critical and discerning about what is safe to share with who. And if you tell people that you're doing things that are illegal, like the more that you share that, the more chance you're going to tell somebody who's going to use that against you. And the more that you like put your loved ones in the position of having to lie for you. So really trying to like balance what's safe and what's not. And to really try to use that as a reason to get to know each other rather than to be afraid of each other. Like a lot of times it's easy to fall into security culture that replicates cop logic, like being suspicious of people who are different than you. And that's like not what this is about. So having really explicit security culture norms can help you, because it's like a lot of people like neurodiversity not being the best when you have these vague security culture norms that you have to be neurotypical in order to understand, because it's like actually makes it harder for everybody when nobody really knows like what to do or not to do. Just being like, oh, our security culture norm in this moment is that like we don't talk about actions that we're planning unless we are in person without technology, and just like naming that up front. Tech security using encrypted apps, but recognizing that if you email somebody's Gmail from a Proton Mail, you might as well be using Gmail. So it has to be end-to-end encrypted. And yeah, there's like a ton more to it. I don't know if I want to like deep dive into it, but if that's something that you're like, oh, I'm curious about this, let's talk after, because I love talking about security culture. I think it's really important. And we're basically at the end. I don't know if we want to do some breakout rooms, or if people want to hop off too. I recognize I've been like talking for a long time. Could share the slides and you could kind of just go do your thing, or we could break out into breakout rooms.
Thank you, Kira. I love everything that you have shared so far. This is really useful and good information for us. I think for the sake of time, if you could just share any resources that you want us to have. We did get your email down, so that will be shared with everyone for anyone that wants to continue this conversation with you. But I'm thinking we need to move on to the next piece so we can close this out. But thank you so much for your time today and for everything that you shared with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'll drop all the like extra resources in the chat, and please send me an email if you want to talk more about anything. And thank you so much for being here and going through all of this.
Yes. No, thank you. Thank you. And I would like to bring Enabel forward if that is okay. If Enabel is ready.
Ryan.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Kira. Oh my gosh, I wanted to just stay and hang out with you. I know we all do. It's been a long day. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying in the struggle together for yourself, for each other. I'm Enabel. I'm part of the care team for this radical gathering. Because we don't believe in doing this work alone, we are inviting you to our last radical care sharing circle tonight, listening to all the ways our communities and nature are continually harmed is hard to hold, even from a distance. So understanding that, we invite you to the sharing circle that's going to start in a moment. I'm going to drop in the chat the way to get the Zoom login. If you're not gonna, oops, here, I'm gonna post it one more time because it didn't make it a link. And then we're gonna do some grounding. We're gonna share in some small circles and just decompress a little bit together. But if you want to party down with Jason, I think I'm gonna, am I passing it to you, Ryan, or Jason?
I'll take it from here.
Okay, cool. All right, so see you over at the circle. We're already there. Otherwise, lots of love to everyone.
Thank you, Annabelle. So we may be wrapping up the radical gathering round 1. I'll say it again, round 1. This is just the beginning. Not only did we take that radical analysis of various problems, we proposed radical solutions, and the way that we ended tonight absolutely showed that. So, wow, I'm just kind of awestruck right now, if I'm being honest. So the resources that we have harvested, they are fruitful. We're excited to share them with you all. We will get the resources that Kira just shared in that. Your time and energy is so deeply appreciated throughout this whole weekend. We have covered a lot of content. It's hit a lot of different topics, and that energy has been felt. So thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing this space with us all. All of our panelists and all of you, you deserve the biggest round of applause for sharing their work, their experiences with us. And really, we encourage you all to follow up with the organizations, the people that were here. We've collected their ways that you can donate to them, ways that you can support them. So please, if anybody really stood out to you, if everybody stood out to you, show your love and support in the ways that feel comfiest for you. I would also like to mention how awesome and radical this time has been with members from Move to Amend and Jason from A Radical Guide. You all welcomed me in with open arms. I'm so excited to see what comes next for us all. I know this energy will continue forward. And with that, I throw it to the long-awaited discussion of what now. We have this resource list. We're going to share it with you all, but we want there to be next steps. So our email, info@radicalgathering.com, will still be active. Our website will still be active. So please reach out to us. Let us know your ideas of how you want to carry on this conversation, and if there's anything that we missed that we want to address at a future time. So please, info@radicalgathering.com, email us, stay in touch. And really, the next step that we can all take right now is to take a pause and dive into the radical care sharing circle that Enabel and our care team has set up for us. You do have to register for that. So the link that is in the chat, be sure to open that, put in your information, and then you'll get connected to the Zoom room. that act of self-care is radical, and this is a way that we can all collectively come together in one space and share that moment of centering ourselves after everything that we've experienced this weekend. So listen to your body in this time, and it's okay to step back and be present with that weight that you feel, and join the radical sharing circle. Experience that with us. We're all feeling something, and it could be joy, it could be just this weight from the abolition panels that we covered and how we're feeling about that and what directions we want to go in with that. So please join the radical care circle. It'll be a good time. Thank you all. If there's anybody else from the planning team that wants to say anything, go for it. But yeah, I hope to see you over in the care sharing circle.